2025 was one of those years where not only a bunch of highly anticipated games finally made it to the market, but also several surprises came out and struck a chord with many people. Many great soundtracks too. And there were a lot of games that I really liked or loved and still replay to this day, both big and small. For that reason, I have decided to make a list of my favorite games and split it up into what my favorite major titles were and my favorite smaller ones, with my top game of the year being a bit of both. But as a disclaimer, I have to mention that there were a couple of beloved titles that I did not play yet, such as Silk Song and Blue Prince, which I still plan to do eventually. And I'm not gonna mention any old games that just received a fresh coat of paint, like Final Fantasy Tactics or Metal Gear Solid Delta. And also, this is not an objective list about the quote-unquote best games of the year, but the games that gave me the most joy, fun, or entertainment. So without further ado, let's get started! Small game number 7. Terminator 2D No Fate. This game came out of nowhere for me. I saw it and immediately knew that I was going to like it. This game feels like they took the crappy Terminator 2 games from the early 90s, combined them, and turned them into something good. The levels in this game are a jar mix of running and gunning, driving, punching, but they feel like they were all cast in the same mold. If you like Terminator 2, you will find all the scenes in here that you'd expect. This feels like it was made with love, has beautiful visuals, and a killer soundtrack. The only downside is that they couldn't get the rights for Arnold, so we don't really get to see the T-800's face, and they always go out of their way to not show it. Lau! Lau! Big game number 7. Donkey Kong Bonanza. He's the leader of the bunch, you know him well. He's finally back to kick some tail. It's Donkey Kong! The Switch 2 may not have its own Mario title yet, but what we got instead is what many rightfully say is a spiritual successor to Mario Odyssey, just with a couple of minor changes and one major change. You can now destroy most of the environments with your bare fists, and it's fun to just wreak havoc and destroy everything. Pauline, who may or may not be Pauline from the original Donkey Kong, is a cute little companion, and most of the animal forms that DK can transform into are fun to play. I have some issues with some of the level design choices, and I don't think it's better than Mario Odyssey, but it's a fun game, and an interesting direction for that big dumb ape. That begs the question, of course, what comes next for Mario? Anyway, now moving on from big dumb apes to tiny kittens, small game number 6. Everdeep Aurora. This is a strange little game. In it, you play as probably the most adorable protagonist of the year, a little cat named Shell, who uses a drill to dig her way through a subterranean world to search for her mother, as a meteor shower lays waste on the surface. On the one hand, it's a rather cozy game, where there is no imminent danger to the protagonist and there is zero fighting, but on the other, there is this strange melancholia and the feeling of impending doom. Gameplay-wise, it's nothing too special, but the visuals and the music, the designs and just the overall feeling really left an impression on me. It's not a game for everyone, but I genuinely enjoyed the experience and still think about it quite regularly. Also, you can meow with the press of a button. Big game number 6. Klops 33. If you watched my video titled I Don't Love Clair Obscur, then you know why it's not my number 1 game of the year. If you didn't, check it out. But still, despite my gripes with the game, I still think it's very good and deserves a spot on this list. I have pretty much said everything I wanted to say in my aforementioned video and, well, everyone has played it, so let's move on. Small game number 5. Demon School. This was actually one of my most anticipated games of the year. I was thrilled that Microsoft finally published their most ambitious game to date. Despite its looks, it's not a Persona-like, but more of a kinda inspired by Persona, but doing something else kinda game. You play as Faye, who enrolls in a college on a remote island where demons bleed over to our world, and it's her job to prevent the looming apocalypse. Unlike many other RPGs, your characters don't have levels and stats, and instead have perks you can equip them with. The combat is really cool, possibly inspired by Into the Breach, which I haven't played, and reminds me of those chess puzzles where you have only a handful of moves to checkmate your opponent. This game is stylish, fun, and has probably my second favorite soundtrack of 2025, right after Club's 33. What's particularly great is that it's paced in such a way that you can play it in 15-minute intervals, which is an incredible feat for an RPG. However, the game's not without its issues, as the dialogue and characters can be a bit hit or miss. And my main concern is that it feels too long, especially when taking the fast pacing into account. Also, the humor and the way the story is told are most certainly not for everyone. But if you happen to be a fan of the Insert Credit podcast, this is basically Brandon Sheffield as a game. Big game number 5. Silent Hill F. I must admit, for the first couple of hours, I did not enjoy this game. Actually, from a gameplay perspective, it does a lot that I greatly dislike. Chase sequences with traps that get you stuck for several seconds, and you get instantly killed when whatever is chasing you catches up with you? Check. Limited inventory space for weapons that break very quickly, and there don't seem to be enough replacements lying around? Check. Unkillable monsters? Check. Having to solve puzzles while unkillable monsters are chasing you? Check-a-reno. All this stuff is extremely annoying to me. Also, for a game that is meant to be played more than once, it is about 6 to 8 hours too long. However, from a presentation and storytelling perspective, I thought this game was great. Applying the Silent Hill formula to a Japanese small town in the 60s just works incredibly well. And the surreal events around Hinako and what twists and turns the story takes for her are heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, and absolutely grotesque and sick at times. What the characters in Hinako in particular have to go through is really tough to watch. There's just so much twisted, disgusting and horrible stuff happening throughout the game. And I say that as someone who's seen his fair share of twisted, disgusting and horrible Japanese movies. The designs of the monsters and surroundings are fantastic in their sickening way. It's really gross stuff. What I'm trying to say is, it's a cute little story about womanhood and growing up. It's about family. And that's what makes it so powerful. Small game number 4. Cabernet. I love vampires. I love gothic settings. I love vampires in gothic settings. In Cabernet, which is a type of wine by the way, you play as Lisa, a young doctor who just got turned into a vampire, and you learn about vampire society and have to make choices that either strengthen your humanity or that will let you become more nihilistic. You become more and more familiar with both the vampires and humans that inhabit a town in an unspecified Eastern European country and can become friends with everyone or alienate them all, depending on how you behave in dialogue. The game feels more like a cozy spin on a vampire RPG because it isn't as dark and violent as many other modern depictions. People can and will die, but what I genuinely like is that in the world of Cabernet, vampires are not necessarily bloodthirsty monsters with a god complex that view humans as lesser beings, although those exist too. But they behave rather like normal humans that just have to feed off blood to survive, and happen to be immortal too. Several even try to help humans the best they can. I really enjoyed the story, characters and dialogue, and I think it's just a neat little game, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to play a more quiet and slightly quote-unquote cozy vampire game that isn't just edgy doom and gloom stuff. Big game number 4. Indiana Jones: The Great Circle. Okay, this is technically a 2024 game, but I'm going to use a little loophole to get it on my list, as it received a PS5 version this year, which was the only way for me to play it. I love the old Indiana Jones trilogy, and I still rewatch it every now and then to this day. This game really manages to capture the feel of the films and the sensation of exploring and being in Indy's shoes. I have some issues with the late game, but for the most part, it was such a joy to run around the Vatican and Giza, solving puzzles and punching Nazis and black shirts in the face. Giza must be one of the most impressive locations in a video game that I have seen in a while. Also, Troy Baker does an excellent Harrison Ford impression.
How long has that been in there?
I haven't opened this suitcase for a year. Not since Cairo.
Small game number 3.
Uh-oh.
Ruffy and the Riverside. This game feels like it was made for the Nintendo GameCube in the best way possible. In this 3D platforming adventure, you play as Ruffy, who has to find the sacred ladders that together form the quote-unquote emblem of Riverside, which is pretty much the Hollywood sign just spelling out the word Riverside, after the evil Rubik's Cube Groll nearly destroyed the world core. Ruffy has the ability to quote-unquote swap, which is a very fun mechanic that allows you to swap textures around. For example, gotta somehow get up a waterfall? Not a problem. Just absorb a vine and turn a waterfall into a vine fall that you can climb up on. The story is fun and nonsensical, the characters and dialogue genuinely made me chuckle multiple times, and the presentation is just adorable. It's just a very happy and fun game with a cute art style that is just a joy to play, and always manages to put a smile on my face. Big game number 3. Mario Kart World. Another game that just puts a smile on my face. I know, this is a controversial one. Many Mario Kart fans were really disappointed by it, but I was just having so much fun playing it, both by myself and with friends. Especially the Knockout Tour mode is such an amazing addition and fits the formula so well. Also, I was never a fan of the whole build your kart feature of the previous Mario Karts, and was actually kinda grateful that they got rid of it. Granted, exploring the open world feels kinda pointless and is a bit of a letdown. I don't think I was alone expecting this game to be somewhat of the Mario equivalent of Forza Horizon, and this is definitely not it. But it is an incredibly fun game with incredible visuals that lets even me of all people want to play it with friends. However, one big flaw that's been tarnishing the entire Mario Kart franchise for several titles now is that there are no award ceremonies anymore. Bring back the podium, and the big dumb fish vomiting out the cup while you're at it. Small game number 2. Absolem, a roguelike beat-em-up RPG. That is a mouthful, and also a genre mix that works incredibly well. This game is utterly fantastic. As pretty much every roguelike, it too is difficult as all hell. But unlike many others, you actually gain a little something with pretty much every death, and become a little stronger in every subsequent run, making the entire endeavor a little more manageable. Stylish visuals, fun characters, amazing combat, and an addictive gameplay loop make this truly one of the best games of the year. And anyone who likes roguelikes and beat-em-ups will find a combination of the two that is very difficult to pass up on. Oh boy, we're almost at the end of the list! And I have to say, the next 2 games I am mentioning now are very close in terms of how much I like them. And depending on the day, the other might actually be the winner. But I had to pick and choose, and due to the format of this list, I figured, hey, putting this at number 2 and the other at number 1 makes the most sense, so let's go for it. My big game number 2 is... Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This game legitimately wowed me on more than one occasion. I was already very fond of the first KCD, but man, Part 2 really adds on top of it and gets rid of many of the kinks that made the first one a bit clunky to play. This game pretty much does what I want out of an RPG. After the introduction, you start off in an unforgiving scenario where you are weak and have nothing, and you have to fight tooth and nail to just survive. And through hard work you eventually manage to become the strongest unbeatable warrior in the land. I love how realistic everything feels without being annoying. I love the combat system. The characters are fun, the language mishmash is delightful, and I really liked how the story developed and where it went. Also, I appreciate how it's a lot more lighthearted when compared to the first one. The world is probably the star of the show, as it's just super impressive how 14th century Bohemia is realized, and it may contain one of my favorite locations in a video game I've seen in over a decade. I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say it's a town that is so remarkable on a technical level, barely contained myself the first time I set foot in it. Plus, if you like castles, you probably won't find more realistic depictions of castles in any other game. I have one major complaint about the game, and that is that it forces stealth missions upon you. And I don't think that they work particularly well, and it's in general something that may not match your playstyle or character build. They are extremely frustrating, and oftentimes I just ended up looking up online how to beat them. Overall though, this is probably one of the best games I have played in many years, and I love it. Although I think that Henry is a great protagonist, who is also well acted, part of me wishes that there was a game like this where I could create my own avatar with my own backstory. But that is of course a personal preference. And well, now it's time to move on to my personal game of the year. Phil's game of the year 2025 is...
Well, daughter of Hades, princess of the underworld, it would seem that you are finally prepared.
Hades 2. In 2020, Hades 1 was released, and completely blew me away. The story and characters, and the dynamic between the titular Hades and the protagonist, his son Zagreus, were wonderful to watch. On top of that, the gameplay loop of fighting your way from room to room and getting stronger until you eventually kick the bucket in one of the game's tough boss fights and get sent back to the hub was addictive as hell. Now its sequel is a bit of a double-edged sword. When it comes to the story, it's not quite as great as the first game, because we are missing a dynamic as fascinating as the one between Zagreus and Hades. But it's still good, and hanging out with all these characters and the goal of kicking Kronos in his wrinkly behind is motivating. But it's just not quite as engaging as the first. But to be fair, the bar that was set was incredibly high. The gameplay, on the other hand, adds a lot to the formula. While it plays very similarly, you now have way more stuff to do in the world. There are now 2 different paths you can take, each with different areas, bosses and big bats. And it's addictive as ever. And also, the amount of voice dialogue still seems to be limitless. Even after hundreds of attempts, each character still has something new to say. I genuinely love to see the script and how many pages it entails. The voice acting is still some of the best out there, and the range these actors have is unbelievable.
Few tales are told of Hades, whose reign as grim lord of the dead came to a sudden end when all at once his past caught up with him.
What I particularly love about this game though, is how quickly you just get to play it. You start a new game, very few words are being said, and you get to have fun. This is something that I really appreciate in the modern gaming landscape. Despite the game having so much dialogue, the pacing is done so well that you never end up doing too much talking and get back in the action rather quickly. And in the end, I'd say this was the deciding factor of why I chose it over KCD2 as my game of the year. It was a very tough call to make, but I think with its addictive gameplay loop, where playing is a top priority, but a wonderful story is still an important aspect of it, Hades 2 really deserves to be the number 1. Then again, ask me in a year or so, and then it might be KCD2 after all, as this really depends on my mood, and they are both fantastic games that deserve lots of awards. But what about you? What were your gaming highlights of 2025? Did you play the games I've listed here? Why do you think Klops 33 should have dominated my list, even though I have had my issues with it? Please, let me know in the comments. That's all from me. If you like this video, leave a like, and if you want to support me, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and I hope you have a lovely day.